Ethan just trusts too much. It's kind of pathetic.
They wanted me gone. Wanted me money. Well then, let's see who wins.
The package arrived on a Tuesday morning when the California sun painted everything golden, including the lies. Ethan Rayner stood in his driveway, work boots still caked with yesterday's mud, staring at the manila envelope with no return address. Inside, 3 photographs and a single note. Check the attic, that's where the truth lives. The first photo showed his wife, Chelsea, kissing another man in their garage. The second showed the same man's hands on her waist. The third showed them laughing together like conspirators sharing a private joke. The man was Jude Connors, his best friend since high school, the guy who'd helped them buy this house 3 years ago. Ethan's hands didn't shake. They never did. 12 years in the Army had trained that out of him. But something cold settled in his chest, like ice forming over still water. "Honey?" Chelsea's voice drifted from the kitchen window. "Everything okay out there? Just work stuff?" he called back, sliding the photos into his jacket pocket. His voice sounded normal. That surprised him. He walked inside, where Chelsea stood at the marble countertop, sipping coffee from her favorite mug, the one that said "World's Best Wife" that he'd bought her last Christmas. She wore yoga pants and an oversized sweater, hair pulled back in that messy bun that used to make his heart skip. Now he studied her face like he was reading blueprints, looking for cracks in the foundation. "How was the Riverside job?" she asked without looking up from her phone. "Long. Mrs. Patterson's furnace was completely shot. Had to order parts." She scrolled through Instagram, double-tapping photos of other people's perfect lives. "Oh, Jude texted. He wants to know if we're still good for dinner Friday." The ice in his chest spread a little wider. "What dinner?" "The one we talked about." "To celebrate his promotion at the development company." She finally looked at him, and for just a moment something flickered across her face. Guilt? Fear? "You remember, right? We discussed it last week." They hadn't discussed anything last week. Ethan had been working 16-hour days trying to save up for the pool she wanted. The pool that would cost $40,000 they didn't really have. "Sure," he said. "Dinner sounds great." Chelsea smiled, and it was the same smile she'd worn in their wedding photos, the same smile she'd given him when he'd carried her across the threshold of this house. The same smile that was now in those photographs directed at another man. "I need to grab some tools from the garage," he said. "Okay. I'll probably head to yoga in a bit." Ethan walked through the kitchen, past the refrigerator covered in their photos, vacations, anniversaries, stupid selfies where they both looked happy and young and in love. Each image felt like evidence of a crime he was only now discovering. The garage smelled like motor oil and Chelsea's perfume. He stood where the photograph had been taken, imagining his wife and his best friend pressed against his workbench, plotting whatever this was. His phone buzzed. A text from his daughter Sarah, away at college. "Dad, I tried calling Mom, but she didn't answer. Can you ask her about Thanksgiving break?" Ethan stared at the message. Sarah was 22, from his first marriage to Linda. Chelsea had always been polite to her, but never warm, never motherly. Now he wondered if that distance had been intentional. Another text from Sarah. Also, weird question, but did you know Mom was asking about your retirement account last month? She called the office where I work part-time and was asking questions about beneficiaries or something. The ice in his chest became a glacier. Ethan climbed the ladder to the attic, following the anonymous tip. The space was cramped and dusty, filled with Christmas decorations and boxes of old photos. But wedged behind the water heater, wrapped in a plastic bag, he found what the note had promised: a burner phone and a USB drive. He pocketed both and climbed back down, his mind working like it had during those long nights in Afghanistan when survival meant thinking 3 moves ahead of the enemy. Except the enemy wasn't a faceless insurgent anymore. The enemy slept in his bed and kissed him goodbye every morning and asked him to sign papers for refinancing that he'd been too trusting to read carefully. That evening, Chelsea made his favorite dinner, pot roast with all the trimmings. She lit candles and opened a bottle of wine, creating the kind of romantic atmosphere that used to make him feel like the luckiest man alive. "I was thinking," she said, cutting into her meat with delicate precision, "maybe we should talk about some changes around here." "What kind of changes?" "Well, the house is getting expensive to maintain. And with my promotion at the marketing firm, I'm making good money now. Maybe it's time for you to think about slowing down." taking better care of yourself. Ethan chewed slowly. I like my work. I know you do. But you're almost 40, honey. How much longer can you crawl around in attics and basements? What happens when your back gives out? Or your knees? She reached across the table and touched his hand. Her engagement ring caught the candlelight. The ring he'd saved 6 months to buy, working overtime jobs while living on ramen noodles. I just want us to be secure, she continued. Maybe we could look into cashing out some of your retirement early. Invested in something smarter. Jude knows about these things. There it was. Jude. What's Jude got to do with our finances? Nothing directly. He just mentioned some investment opportunities. Real estate development projects that could really pay off. She squeezed his hand. We could finally have the life we've always dreamed about. I thought we already did. Something shifted in her expression, like a mask slipping for just a moment. Don't be so literal, Ethan. You know what I mean? After dinner, while Chelsea took a bath, Ethan sat in his truck and plugged the USB drive into his laptop. The files were audio recordings, dated over the past 6 months. His heart hammered as he clicked the first one. Chelsea's voice. He signed the papers yesterday. He barely even read them. Jude's voice. Good. That gives us full access to the joint account. What about the retirement fund? That's trickier. But I'm working on it. I told him we needed to restructure for tax purposes. And he believed you? Ethan's not stupid, but he trusts me. Sometimes I think he trusts everyone too much. It's actually kind of pathetic. Jude laughed. Poor bastard. Working his ass off while we plan his future. Don't feel sorry for him. He'll be fine. He's resourceful. And it's not like I'm taking everything, just most of it. What about the daughter? What about her? She's suspicious. Asked me some weird questions at the barbecue last month. Sarah's a bitch who never liked me anyway. Once this is over, she won't be our problem anymore. Ethan stopped the recording and sat in the darkness of his truck, listening to his own breathing. The woman he'd loved for 7 years, the woman he'd married and built a life with, was talking about him like he was a mark in a con game. He played the next recording. Chelsea. The pool installation starts next week. Once that's done, I'll file for separation. Cite emotional distance, maybe some financial irresponsibility on his part. Jude, you sure you want to wait that long? I need the pool finished first. It adds value to the house, and I want every penny when we sell. We sell? Oh, honey, did you think I was planning to stay in that suburban nightmare forever? Once I get my half of everything, we're buying that condo in Miami. The one with the ocean view. What if he fights the divorce? He won't. Ethan's old-fashioned. He'll try to be noble about it, give me whatever I ask for rather than drag things out in court. Besides, I've been documenting his moods, his stress levels. I can make a case for emotional instability if I need to. You're scary, you know that? I'm practical. There's a difference. Ethan turned off the laptop and stared at his house, the house he'd thought of as their sanctuary, their future. Every light was on, making it glow like a beacon in the darkness. Chelsea was probably in their bedroom now, moisturizing her face and reading a romance novel, playing the part of the devoted wife. Tomorrow she would kiss him goodbye and ask about his day when he came home. She would laugh at his jokes and curl up against him while they watched television. She would perform their marriage like an actress who'd memorized every line. His phone rang. Sarah. Hey, Dad. I've been thinking about Mom's call to my office. Something feels off. What do you mean? She was asking really specific questions about your benefits, like what would happen if you died or became disabled? Who would get the money? It's just weird, you know? Ethan closed his eyes. Yeah? Weird. Are you guys okay? You sound strange. We're fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Okay, but Dad, if something was wrong, you'd tell me, right? Of course. After he hung up, Ethan sat in his truck until the last light went out in the house. Then he drove to the 24-hour diner on Route 18, where he ordered coffee and tried to figure out what the hell to do with the rest of his life. The next morning, Chelsea was already gone when he woke up. A note on the kitchen counter said she had an early meeting with a client. Ethan made coffee and toast and tried to act normal, even though normalcy felt like a costume that no longer fit. His phone buzzed with a text from Jude. Hey man, excited for dinner tomorrow. Chelsea's been planning something special. Ethan stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Can't wait." He spent the day installing a new heating system in a sprawling McMansion, losing himself in the familiar routine of measuring and cutting and connecting. Physical work had always been his meditation, a way to quiet his mind and focus on problems that had clear solutions. But today, even the work couldn't stop his brain from spinning. He kept replaying the recordings, analyzing every conversation he'd had with Chelsea over the past 6 months, looking for signs he'd missed. There were plenty. Her sudden interest in their finances, the way she'd started working late more often, the new clothes, the expensive cosmetics, the gym membership she'd insisted on, even though they were supposedly saving money, and Jude, his best friend since they were 17, drinking beer behind the hardware store and talking about getting out of their small hometown. Jude had gotten out first, going to college on a partial scholarship, while Ethan had enlisted after graduation. When Ethan finally came home, Jude was already building his real estate empire. But they'd picked up their friendship like no time had passed. Jude had been his best man. Ethan had been his. Now Jude was sleeping with his wife and planning to rob him blind. That evening, Ethan drove to a quiet bar across town and called the number on the business card he'd been carrying in his wallet for 2 years. Monica Valdez, private investigator. They'd met at Jude's birthday party, where she'd been dating one of his business partners. She'd given Ethan her card as a joke after he'd told a story about trying to track down a stolen tool trailer. "Keep this," she'd said with a laugh. "You never know when you might need a professional snoop." The phone rang 3 times before she answered. Valdez Investigations. "Monica, this is Ethan Rayner. We met at Jude's party, I remember." The HVAC guy with the honest face? Her voice was warm but cautious. "What can I do for you, Ethan? I need help, and I need someone I can trust." "That sounds ominous. Where are you?" "Murphy's Pub on 5th Street. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Monica arrived wearing jeans and a leather jacket, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was in her early 30s, with sharp eyes and the kind of confidence that came from dealing with other people's worst moments for a living. She slid into the booth across from him and ordered a beer. "You look like hell, Ethan. What's going on?" He told her everything. The photographs, the recordings, the slow realization that his entire marriage had been a carefully orchestrated lie. Monica listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making notes on a small pad. When he finished, she leaned back and studied his face. "I'm sorry. That's a special kind of betrayal. I need to know what they're planning, all of it. I can help with that. But first, let me ask you something. What do you want the end game to be here?" Ethan thought about it. A week ago, he would have said he just wanted his wife back, wanted to fix whatever was broken between them. Now he felt something else entirely. Something cold and patient and utterly without mercy. "I want them to pay," he said quietly. Monica smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Now you're talking my language." Over the next hour, they developed a plan. Monica would conduct surveillance on both Chelsea and Jude, documenting their activities and gathering evidence of the affair and the financial fraud. Ethan would continue playing the oblivious husband while secretly protecting his assets and building a case. "The key is patience," Monica explained. "Let them think they're winning. Give them enough rope to hang themselves. Then when you have everything you need, you pull the trigger. How long? A few weeks, maybe a month. Depends on how sloppy they get." She finished her beer. "In the meantime, don't sign anything else. Don't give them access to any new accounts. And for God's sake, don't let on that you know. What if I can't keep up the act?" "You will. You're tougher than you think." Monica stood up and dropped a 20 on the table. "I'll be in touch soon. And Ethan? This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Make sure you're ready for that." The dinner with Jude was excruciating. They went to an upscale Italian place downtown, the kind of restaurant where the portions were tiny and the prices were astronomical. Chelsea wore a new dress that probably cost more than Ethan made in a week, and she looked stunning in it. Jude arrived 15 minutes late, full of apologies and expensive cologne. He hugged Chelsea a little too long and shook Ethan's hand with the kind of firm grip that was supposed to convey sincerity. "Sorry, guys. Client meeting ran late. You know how it is." They sat at a table by the window, watching traffic crawl past in the evening light. Jude ordered an expensive bottle of wine and talked about his latest development project, luxury condos near the waterfront. The profit margins are insane, he said, gesturing with his wine glass. We're talking about a 200% return on investment, maybe more. Sounds risky, Ethan said. All good investments are risky. That's what separates the wealthy from the comfortable. Jude smiled. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about what we talked about, Chelsea. The investment opportunity. Ethan looked at his wife. What investment opportunity? Chelsea's cheeks flushed slightly. Jude mentioned some projects that might be good for us. I was going to talk to you about it. I'm just saying, Jude continued. You guys are sitting on a gold mine with your retirement savings. Why let it sit in some low-yield account when you could be building real wealth? Because it's retirement money, Ethan said. It's supposed to be safe. Safe is just another word for stagnant. Jude leaned forward. Look, I get it. You work hard for your money, but at some point you have to make your money work for you. Chelsea nodded enthusiastically. That's exactly what I've been trying to tell him. Ethan smiled and took a sip of wine. Let me think about it. For the rest of dinner, he watched them, the way Jude's hand lingered on Chelsea's shoulder when he helped her with her coat, the way she laughed just a little too loudly at his jokes, the way they looked at each other when they thought he wasn't paying attention. They were good at hiding it, but not perfect. There were micro-expressions, subtle touches, shared glances that lasted a fraction of a second too long. To anyone else, they would have looked like friends enjoying dinner. To Ethan, who now knew what to look for, they looked like conspirators. After dinner, Jude suggested drinks at a bar nearby. Ethan begged off, claiming an early morning job, but encouraged Chelsea to go. You never get to go out anymore, he said, kissing her cheek. Have fun. Driving home alone, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced since his deployment overseas. The calm that came with accepting a mission. He had an objective now, a target, and a plan. Monica called the next morning with her first report. They went to the Marriott downtown after drinks, she said without preamble. Room 412. Paid for with a credit card registered to one of Jude's shell companies. How long? 3 hours. I've got photos of them entering and leaving if you need them for court. What else? I followed Jude to his office this morning. He met with a lawyer named Patterson, specializes in asset protection. Then he had lunch with someone from the mayor's office. I'm still working on that connection. The mayor? Your boy Jude's got his fingers in a lot of pies. Some of them smell rotten. Monica paused. There's something else. I hacked Chelsea's email. She's been communicating with a divorce attorney for 3 weeks. Ethan sat down heavily in his kitchen chair. 3 weeks. The lawyer's name is Catherine Moss. Very expensive, very aggressive. Specializes in high-asset divorces. According to their correspondence, Chelsea's planning to file papers next month. After the pool's finished. Probably. She's also been researching property values in Miami. Looks like she's already picked out a condo. That afternoon, Ethan drove to the bank and quietly moved half of their joint savings into a new account under his business name. It wasn't stealing. It was his money too. But it was a start. He also called his lawyer, a straightforward guy named Tom Bradley who'd handled his first divorce 15 years ago. I need to see you, Ethan said. It's urgent. Tom's office was in a strip mall between a pizza place and a dry cleaner, but he was honest and competent and had never lost a case he thought he could win. Jesus, Ethan, Tom said after hearing the story. She's been planning this for months. What are my options? Well, the good news is you've got evidence of adultery and financial deception. That plays well in court, especially with a sympathetic plaintiff like you. Blue-collar guy, military veteran, faithful husband. And the bad news? She's got a head start. If she's been hiding assets or moving money around, it might take time to track everything down. Time you might not have once she files. Tom leaned back in his chair. My advice, document everything. Get more evidence. And file first. I want to wait. Why? Ethan thought about the recordings, about Jude's laugh, about Chelsea calling him pathetic. Because I want them to think they've won. Right up until the moment they realize they've lost everything. Tom raised an eyebrow. That's not legal advice I can give you. I'm not asking for legal advice on that part. Over the next 2 weeks, Monica built an airtight case. She photographed Chelsea and Jude at 3 different hotels. She documented meetings between Jude and various city officials. She discovered that several of Jude's development projects were being fast-tracked through the permitting process, despite environmental concerns. Most importantly, she uncovered the full scope of their financial plan. "They're not just stealing your retirement," Monica explained during one of their clandestine meetings. "They're using it to buy property that Jude's company will then develop with city funding. It's a shell game, but a lucrative one." "How much money are we talking about?" "Your part, maybe 200,000, but the whole scheme? Millions?" Ethan stared at the photographs spread across Monica's desk, his wife kissing another man, his best friend shaking hands with corrupt officials, financial documents showing money flowing through a maze of shell companies. "There's more," Monica said. "I think they're planning to frame you." "For what?" "Emotional instability. Possibly domestic issues. I found a recording on Chelsea's phone. She's been documenting your mood swings and aggressive behavior. None of it's true, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to sound convincing to a judge. She's building a case against me. A preemptive strike. If you try to fight the divorce, she'll claim you're dangerous. Get a restraining order, maybe even have you arrested. Then she takes everything, while you're dealing with criminal charges." Ethan felt the ice in his chest crack, revealing something much darker underneath. "How long before they move?" "Soon. The pool's almost finished, and I intercepted an email from her lawyer. She's planning to file papers next Friday. Then we move first." That night, Ethan sat in his garage and made a list. Not a to-do list, but a target list. Chelsea and Jude were the primary objectives, but there were secondary targets too. Natalie, Chelsea's sister who had helped set up some of the shell companies. Mayor Halbert, who had taken bribes to fast-track Jude's projects. The sleazy lawyer who was laundering money through fake real estate transactions. By the time he finished, the list had 12 names on it. Monica had taught him to think like a predator. Study your prey. Learn their habits, their weaknesses, their fears, then strike when they're most vulnerable. Ethan had been a soldier once. He remembered how to hunt. The next morning, Chelsea announced that she was going out of town for a long weekend. "A business conference in Las Vegas," she said. "A chance to network and learn about new marketing strategies." "Will you be okay here by yourself?" she asked, stroking his cheek with fake concern. "I'll manage." "Maybe you could use the time to relax. You've been so stressed lately." Ethan nodded and kissed her goodbye, tasting lies on her lips. An hour after she left, Monica called. "They're not in Vegas. They're at a resort in Napa Valley. Registered under fake names, but I've got photos." "Good. That gives us the weekend to work." Ethan spent Saturday installing surveillance equipment in his own house. Tiny cameras in the bedroom, the kitchen, the home office where Chelsea kept her computer. Monica had provided the gear, military-grade stuff that was virtually undetectable. "If she's recording you, we're recording her," Monica had explained. "Fair's fair." Sunday, Ethan drove to Jude's office building. The security was minimal. A single guard who spent most of his time watching YouTube videos. Ethan had done enough commercial HVAC work to know how to move through buildings without being noticed. Jude's corner office was exactly what Ethan had expected. Expensive furniture, motivational posters, a view of the city that probably cost more in monthly rent than Ethan made in 6 months. Ethan planted bugs in the phone, the computer, and the desk drawer where Jude kept his personal files. Then he photographed every document he could find, including several that detailed the mayor's involvement in the development scam. By Sunday night, Ethan had enough evidence to destroy both of them, but he wasn't ready to pull the trigger yet. He wanted them to make the first move. He wanted them to file for divorce and try to steal his money and ruin his reputation, because the harder they hit him, the harder he was going to hit back. Chelsea returned from her conference on Monday evening, full of stories about seminars and networking events that had never happened. She seemed relaxed and happy, glowing with the satisfaction of a job well done. "I learned so much," she said over dinner. "It really opened my eyes to new possibilities." "Like what?" "Oh, different approaches to marketing, new ways to build client relationships." She smiled. "I think it's going to lead to some exciting opportunities." Ethan nodded and asked about her presentations, her hotel, the other attendees. Chelsea answered every question smoothly, building an elaborate fiction that would have been impressive if it weren't so evil. After dinner, She suggested they christen the new pool with a midnight swim. They'd only used it twice since the installation was completed, and Chelsea had been pushing for them to enjoy it more. "It's such a beautiful night," she said, slipping into a bikini that emphasized every curve. "And we paid so much for this thing. We should get our money's worth." They swam in the dark, the underwater lights casting blue shadows on their skin. Chelsea was playful and affectionate, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him like they were newlyweds. "I love you," she whispered against his ear. "I love our life together." Ethan held her close and told her he loved her too, and for a moment he almost meant it. This was the woman he'd fallen in love with 7 years ago. This was the Chelsea who'd made him believe in happy endings. But then he remembered the recordings, the photographs, the carefully orchestrated plan to destroy him. This wasn't love, it was performance art. 2 days later, Monica called with the news Ethan had been expecting. She filed this morning, divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences and emotional estrangement. She's asking for the house, half your retirement, and spousal support. What about the restraining order? Not yet, but her lawyer filed a motion claiming you've been exhibiting erratic behavior. They're building the case gradually. How long do I have? You'll be served tomorrow, probably at work. After that, it's showtime. Ethan was replacing a furnace in a downtown office building when the process server found him. The young man looked apologetic as he handed over the papers. "Sorry, Mr. Rayner. Just doing my job." Ethan read the documents in his truck, studying Chelsea's carefully worded accusations. According to her version of events, he'd become increasingly unstable over the past year. Angry outbursts, financial irresponsibility, emotional withdrawal. She painted herself as a concerned wife trying to save a failing marriage. It was all lies, but they were believable lies, the kind that would resonate with a judge who didn't know either of them personally. That evening, Ethan came home to find Chelsea waiting in the kitchen with a bottle of wine and a sad smile. "I guess you got the papers," she said softly. Ethan set them on the counter without looking at her. "Yeah, I'm sorry it came to this. I really am." Her voice was perfectly calibrated, hurt but hopeful, disappointed but not bitter. "I kept thinking we could work things out, but what? You've been so distant lately, so angry all the time. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around you." Ethan poured himself a glass of wine and sat across from her. "I'm not angry. You're angry right now. I can see it in your eyes. You just served me with divorce papers, Chelsea. What did you expect? I expected you to talk to me, to fight for us." Tears welled up in her eyes. "But you're just sitting there like you don't even care." It was a masterful performance. If Ethan hadn't known the truth, he might have believed her. He might have fallen to his knees and begged for another chance. Instead, he reached across the table and took her hand. "You're right," he said quietly. "I haven't been the husband you deserve. I've been so focused on work, on providing for us, that I forgot about everything else." Chelsea's tears stopped flowing. She looked confused, like an actress who'd forgotten her lines. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe this is for the best. Maybe we both deserve a fresh start." You're not going to fight the divorce?" Ethan squeezed her hand. "What would be the point? If you're not happy, if I can't make you happy, then dragging this out in court would just hurt both of us." Chelsea stared at him for a long moment. She'd been prepared for anger, for denial, for desperate pleas. She hadn't been prepared for acceptance. "I want you to have the house," Ethan continued, "and the pool. You put so much work into making this place beautiful. It should be yours." That's very generous. "I just want you to be happy, Chelsea. That's all I've ever wanted." Now, Chelsea looked genuinely confused. This wasn't part of the script she'd rehearsed with her lawyer. "What about your retirement?" "The settlement? We'll figure it out. I trust you to be fair." Chelsea nodded slowly, but Ethan could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She was trying to figure out what game he was playing, what trap he was setting. There was no trap. Not yet. Ethan was simply giving her exactly what she wanted, exactly what she'd planned to take anyway. He was making it easy for her, which would make what came next so much harder for her to understand. Over the following week, Ethan played the role of the defeated husband to perfection. He moved into a motel across town, taking only his clothes and tools. He agreed to every demand Chelsea's lawyer made, signing papers without reading them, accepting settlement terms that were barely short of theft. His own lawyer, Tom Bradley, was baffled. "She's taking you to the cleaners, Ethan." "Why aren't you fighting this?" "Because I'm tired, Tom. I just want it to be over." "This isn't like you. You're one of the most stubborn guys I know." Ethan shrugged. "Maybe I'm changing." Meanwhile, Monica continued her surveillance. Chelsea and Jude were getting careless, drunk on their apparent victory. They were seen together at expensive restaurants, shopping for furniture, even looking at condos in Miami. "They think they've won," Monica reported. "Jude's already talking about liquidating your retirement fund to invest in his next project." "How soon?" "Days, maybe a week. Once the divorce is finalized, they'll move fast." "Then it's time." Ethan had spent the week preparing for war. He'd transferred his business assets to a dummy corporation, moved his tools and equipment to a secure storage facility, and documented every piece of evidence Monica had gathered. But more importantly, he'd prepared himself mentally for what he was about to do. The Ethan who had trusted blindly, who had believed in the goodness of people, who had turned the other cheek. That man was gone. In his place was someone harder. Someone who understood that mercy was a luxury he could no longer afford. The first shot was fired on a Thursday morning. Ethan walked into the offices of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and laid out the entire case against Jude and Mayor Halberd. The evidence was overwhelming. Recorded conversations, financial documents, photographs of money changing hands. Agent Patricia Wong listened to everything without expression, occasionally asking clarifying questions or requesting additional documentation. "This is extensive," she said finally. "How long have you been gathering this? A few weeks? And you're certain about the accuracy?" "I'm certain." Agent Wong nodded. "We'll need to verify everything, but if this is accurate, you've just handed us a major corruption case. We're talking about federal charges, RICO violations. These people could spend decades in prison." "Good." The second shot came an hour later. Ethan drove to the offices of the local newspaper and met with investigative reporter David Kim. Kim had been digging into city corruption for months, but hadn't been able to connect all the dots. Ethan connected them for him. "Jesus Christ," Kim muttered, scrolling through the financial documents on his laptop. "This is Watergate-level stuff. The mayor's been taking bribes for years. Can you run with it?" "Are you kidding? This is the story of my career." Kim looked up from the screen. "But you realize this is going to destroy more than just the mayor and your friend, right?" "There are a lot of powerful people involved in these deals. I'm counting on it." The third shot was the most personal. Ethan drove to Jude's office building and rode the elevator to the 15th floor. Jude's secretary announced him, and a moment later, Ethan was sitting across from his former best friend. "Ethan." Jude stood up with a big smile, arms extended for a hug. "How are you holding up, buddy? I heard about the divorce." "I'm really sorry." Ethan didn't stand. "Are you?" Jude's smile faltered slightly. "Of course I am. You guys seemed so happy." "Seemed?" "Look, I know this is hard. Divorce is never easy. But maybe it's for the best, you know? Sometimes people just grow apart." Ethan studied Jude's face, the face he'd known since they were teenagers, the face that had stood beside him at his wedding, that had shared 1,000 beers and 1,000,000 conversations. "I brought you something," Ethan said, pulling out his phone. He pressed play on the first recording. Chelsea's voice filled the office. "He signed the papers yesterday. He barely even read them." Jude's voice. "Good. That gives us full access to the joint account." The color drained from Jude's face as his own words played back to him. He reached for the phone, but Ethan pulled it away. "There's more," Ethan said calmly. "Hours of it. You two really should have been more careful about where you had your conversations." Jude sank into his chair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Ethan, I can explain. No need. It's all very clear." Ethan stood up. "The FBI has copies of everything. So does the newspaper. By tomorrow morning, this whole city's going to know what you've been up to. You can't do this. We're friends. We've been friends since we were 17. I remember." Ethan's voice was ice cold. "I also remember being your best man. I remember helping you move when you got your first apartment. I remember lending you money when your business was struggling." Jude's hands were shaking now. "Look, Chelsea and I, it just happened. We didn't plan it. You didn't plan falling in love, but you definitely planned stealing my money." Ethan leaned forward. $200,000, Jude. That was my retirement, my future. And you were going to take it to buy yourself a condo in Miami. We were going to pay you back? With what? The profits from your next scam? Ethan shook his head. You know what the funny thing is? I might have forgiven the affair. People fall out of love. It happens. But the money, the lies, the way you both laughed about how pathetic I was? Jude tried to speak, but no words came out. The FBI will be here this afternoon with a warrant, Ethan continued. They're going to seize your computers, your files, your bank records. They're going to find every bribe you paid, every deal you fixed, every law you broke. Ethan, please. And when they're done with you, when you're sitting in a federal prison thinking about how you threw away 30 years of friendship for a woman who's probably going to testify against you to save her own skin, I want you to remember something. Ethan walked to the door, then turned back. I want you to remember that I gave you every chance to be honest with me, every chance to be the friend I thought you were. You chose to be my enemy instead. He left Jude sitting in his office, staring at the phone that contained the evidence of his own destruction. By evening, the news was everywhere. The headline in the city paper read, Mayor, developer charged in massive corruption scheme. Kim's article laid out the entire conspiracy in devastating detail, naming names and providing documentation. Ethan watched the coverage from his motel room, eating takeout Chinese food and drinking beer. His phone had been ringing all day. Reporters wanting comments, friends expressing shock, his daughter calling to make sure he was okay. He'd turned it off hours ago. Tonight, he just wanted to watch the world he'd known burn down. Chelsea called the motel directly at 10 p.m. The desk clerk put her through after she claimed to be his wife. Ethan, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all day. I saw the news, he said. This is insane. Jude's been arrested. The FBI came to my office. They're saying he's been stealing money, taking bribes. Imagine that. There was a long pause. When Chelsea spoke again, her voice was different. Careful. They asked me about our divorce, about our finances. They seemed to think I was involved somehow. Were you? Of course not. How could you even ask that? Just wondering. Another pause. Ethan, I need to see you. We need to talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. Yes, there is. The police think Jude used our divorce to hide money. They think I helped him. You have to tell them that's not true. Ethan smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Do I? Ethan. Did you know, Chelsea, that adultery affects property division in divorce cases, especially when it's combined with financial fraud? The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. I don't know what you're talking about, Chelsea said finally. The Marriott downtown, room 412, the resort in Napa Valley. Your romantic weekend while I was home installing surveillance equipment in our house. Surveillance equipment? Cameras, microphones, GPS trackers. Amazing what you can buy online these days. Ethan took a sip of beer. Amazing what people say when they think no one's listening. Chelsea's breathing became ragged. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself. Turns out that was a good decision. Ethan, please. Whatever you think you know. I know everything, Chelsea. I know about the shell companies, the hidden assets, the plan to claim I was mentally unstable. I know about the condo in Miami and the fake business conference in Vegas. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared, because tomorrow morning I'm filing new paperwork with the court. Adultery, fraud, conspiracy. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky to keep the clothes on your back. You bastard. You miserable, pathetic bastard. There it was. The real Chelsea. The mask was finally off. There's the woman I married, Ethan said. For a minute there, I almost missed her. You think you're so smart. You think you've won. But you have no idea what you're dealing with. Enlighten me. Jude has friends. Powerful friends. People who won't appreciate what you've done. People who might decide you're a problem that needs to be solved. Is that a threat? It's a warning. From someone who used to care about you. Ethan laughed. It was a sound without humor, without warmth. You never cared about me, Chelsea. I was just a meal ticket, a steady paycheck with benefits and a pension. That's not true. It's completely true. And you know what? I'm okay with it. Because it means I don't have to feel guilty about what happens next. He hung up before she could respond. The next morning brought new developments. Jude had been denied bail after prosecutors argued he was a flight risk. 2 more city officials had been arrested. The FBI had frozen assets belonging to a dozen shell companies, and Chelsea had been served with new divorce papers that accused her of adultery, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. Ethan met with Tom Bradley at 9 a.m. to review their strategy. "This is beautiful work," Tom said, flipping through the evidence files. "I've never seen a case this airtight." "She's going to get destroyed in court." "What about criminal charges?" "That's up to the prosecutor, but I'd say it's likely. The FBI seems very interested in her role in the money laundering." "Good." Tom looked up from the files. "You know, I've been practicing law for 25 years. I've seen a lot of messy divorces, a lot of angry spouses, but I've never seen anyone plan revenge this methodically." "Is that a problem?" "Not legally. Everything you did was perfectly legal. I'm just wondering if you're okay with what you've become." Ethan thought about it. The man he'd been 3 weeks ago would have been horrified by what he'd done. That man had believed in forgiveness, in second chances, in the fundamental goodness of people. But that man had also been a fool. "I'm fine with it," Ethan said. The civil war between Ethan and Chelsea lasted 6 weeks. She hired the most expensive lawyer in the city, but there was no defense against the evidence Monica had gathered. Audio recordings, video surveillance, financial documents, it all painted a picture of a woman who had systematically betrayed her husband while planning to steal his life savings. Chelsea fought dirty. She accused Ethan of domestic issues, emotional offense, and mental instability. She claimed he'd threatened her, stalked her, and invaded her privacy. None of it stuck. Ethan had been too careful, too methodical. Every conversation had been recorded, every action documented. When Chelsea's lawyer tried to claim she was the victim of an offensive husband, Ethan's team played recordings of her laughing about his pathetic trust and planning his financial destruction. The final hearing was held on a gray Tuesday morning in November. Chelsea sat at the defendant's table looking nothing like the woman who had kissed Jude in their garage 6 weeks earlier. She'd lost weight, her hair was unkempt, and her designer clothes had been replaced by a simple black dress that had seen better days. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, read the settlement terms aloud. Chelsea would receive nothing from the marriage except her personal belongings. The house would be sold, with all proceeds going to Ethan. She would pay him spousal support for 2 years, and she would be responsible for all legal fees. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for possible criminal prosecution. The evidence presented suggests that Mrs. Rayner engaged in a pattern of fraud and deception that may constitute criminal conspiracy." Chelsea's lawyer requested an appeal, but it was denied. The evidence was too overwhelming, the fraud too obvious. As they left the courthouse, Chelsea caught up to Ethan in the parking lot. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice hollow. "I'm satisfied. You've destroyed my life. You destroyed mine first. I just returned the favor." Chelsea stared at him with genuine hatred. "I loved you once." "No, you didn't. You loved what I could provide. There's a difference." "And what about you? Did you ever love me?" Ethan considered the question. "Yeah. I loved who I thought you were. But that person never existed, did she?" Chelsea didn't answer. She walked away across the parking lot, her heels clicking on the wet asphalt, and disappeared into the gray November morning. Ethan never saw her again. 3 months later, he was sitting in his new apartment, a modest place across town, furnished with the basics, when Monica called with an update. "Jude took a plea deal," she said. 7 years in federal prison. He'll be eligible for parole in 5. "What about Chelsea?" 2 years, suspended sentence, but she's broke, completely wiped out. Last I heard, she was working at a department store in Sacramento." "And the others?" "Mayor Halbert got 15 years. His fixer got 10. Most of the smaller fish are cooperating with prosecutors to avoid jail time." Ethan nodded. Justice had been served, but it felt hollow somehow. He'd expected satisfaction, maybe even joy. Instead, he felt empty. "You okay?" Monica asked. "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine." Ethan looked around his new apartment. It was clean and functional, but it wasn't home. Nothing felt like home anymore. "I keep wondering if there was another way," he said. "If I could have handled this differently." "You could have. You could have confronted them, tried to work things out, maybe saved your marriage. And they would have kept lying, kept stealing, kept planning to destroy me." "Probably. Look, Ethan, what you did wasn't pretty, but it was effective, and it was legal. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for. After Monica hung up, Ethan sat in his kitchen and tried to figure out what to do with the rest of his life. He was 40 years old, divorced for the second time, and wealthy enough to never work again if he didn't want to. But he didn't know what he wanted anymore. The man who had trusted blindly was gone. The man who had believed in happy endings was dead. In his place was someone harder, colder, more calculating. Someone who understood that the world was full of predators, and the only way to survive was to become a better predator than everyone else. His phone rang. An unknown number. Mr. Rayner? This is Detective Janet Mills with the Sacramento Police Department. I got your number from a private investigator named Monica Valdez. What can I do for you, Detective? We have a situation here. A man named Robert Kane. His wife disappeared 3 weeks ago along with his business partner and about $500,000 from their joint accounts. Ethan sat up straighter. I'm listening. Miss? Valdez said you might be able to help us understand how this kind of thing works. The financial fraud, the planning, the psychological manipulation. She said that, did she? She also said you might be interested in helping Mr. Kane get his money back. Unofficially, of course. Ethan smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. Detective Mills, I think I'd like to meet Mr. Kane. Can you be here tomorrow? I'll be there tonight. After he hung up, Ethan packed a small bag and loaded his tools into his truck. He was going to Sacramento to meet a man whose life had been destroyed by people he trusted. A man who needed help getting justice or revenge. Sometimes they were the same thing. As he drove through the California hills toward his new mission, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced since the day he'd found those photographs in his mailbox. Purpose. He'd learned how to hunt. Now it was time to teach others. Robert Kane was waiting in the parking lot of a truck stop outside Sacramento when Ethan arrived. He was a big man, maybe 55, with the kind of weathered hands that came from years of physical labor. He looked like Ethan had felt 3 months ago, lost, angry, and desperate for answers. You're the guy Monica told me about? Kane asked. I'm the guy. They sat in Kane's truck and talked for 2 hours. The story was depressingly familiar. A faithless wife, a treacherous business partner, a carefully orchestrated plan to steal everything Kane had worked for. They cleaned out our accounts last Tuesday, Kane said. Business account, personal savings, even my daughter's college fund. Took the RV, the boat, everything that wasn't nailed down. Where are they now? Mexico, probably, or maybe Europe. My wife always talked about wanting to see Paris. Ethan studied Kane's face. The man was hurt, but he wasn't broken. There was steel underneath the pain. What do you want, Robert? I want my money back. I want them to pay for what they did, even if it means becoming someone you don't recognize. Kane thought about it for a long moment. My wife used to say I was too nice, too trusting. Maybe it's time I learned to be something else. Ethan smiled. Then let's get to work. Over the next month, Ethan taught Robert Kane everything Monica had taught him: how to gather evidence, how to track financial transactions, how to build a case that would stand up in court. More importantly, he taught him how to think like a predator. The key is patience, Ethan explained as they sat in a surveillance van outside the hotel where Kane's wife was staying with her lover. You let them think they've won. You let them get comfortable, then you strike when they least expect it. How do you know when it's time? You'll know. Trust me. They struck on a Thursday morning. Kane's wife and her partner had been living it up in Cabo San Lucas for 3 weeks, spending his money on expensive hotels and designer clothes. They thought they were safe, untouchable. They were wrong. The Mexican authorities arrested them at the airport as they tried to board a flight to Spain. Extradition papers had been filed, bank accounts had been frozen, and every asset they'd stolen had been traced and documented. Kane got his money back. All of it, plus interest and penalties. His wife got 5 years in federal prison. Her partner got 7. How does it feel? Ethan asked as they watched the news coverage of the arrests. Kane smiled. It was a cold smile, very similar to the one Ethan had been wearing lately. It feels like justice, Kane said. Maybe not the kind they teach you about in Sunday school, but justice all the same. 6 months later, Ethan's phone rang again. Another desperate husband, another stolen fortune, another chance to teach someone how to fight back. Then another, And another. Word was spreading, quietly and carefully, through networks of private investigators, divorce lawyers, and men who'd been destroyed by people they trusted. Ethan Rayner was the guy you called when the system couldn't help you. When the police said it was a civil matter and the lawyers said it would take years to get justice. Ethan was the guy who taught you how to get justice yourself. He never advertised his services. He never asked for payment. He simply showed up when someone needed him, taught them what they needed to know, and disappeared back into the shadows. Some people called him a vigilante. Others called him a criminal. Ethan didn't care what they called him. He knew what he was. A man who'd learned that sometimes the only way to stop a predator was to become a better predator, and he was very, very good at it. 2 years after his divorce was finalized, Ethan sat in his truck outside a suburban house in Phoenix, watching a man named David Porter discover that his wife had been stealing from their joint business account. Porter was 42, a contractor like Ethan had been, with calloused hands and an honest face. He'd built a successful business from nothing, working 16-hour days and sacrificing everything for his family. Now his wife was planning to take it all and run off with her personal trainer. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from Monica. New case in Denver. Investment advisor embezzled $2 million from a family trust. Interested? Ethan typed back. Can't. Busy in Phoenix? Send the details to Kane. Robert Kane had become Ethan's first lieutenant, learning to hunt with the same cold efficiency that Ethan had mastered. There were others now, too, a growing network of men who'd been betrayed and destroyed and rebuilt into something harder. They called themselves the Brotherhood of the Burned. It wasn't official, just a name that had stuck. They had no headquarters, no formal structure, no membership dues. They just helped each other hunt. David Porter was about to become the newest member. Ethan got out of his truck and walked up to Porter's front door. Through the window, he could see the man sitting at his kitchen table, staring at bank statements with the same expression Ethan had worn when he'd first discovered the truth about Chelsea. Ethan knocked softly. Porter opened the door, his face drawn and hollow. Can I help you? Mr. Porter, my name is Ethan Rayner. I think we need to talk. About what? Ethan smiled. It was the smile of a man who'd learned that the world was full of wolves, and the only way to survive was to have sharper teeth. About how to make them pay.